Scott Horton. I'm looking forward to a night of wisdom, insight, hilarity, passion. You know,
all it should be fun. I also will be watching the chat room. It should be great. We're counting on you guys. All right.
You know,
hey, so yeah, welcome to our show. It's Eye on the Empire with me, Scott Horton, and him, Jeffrey Tucker. Tell them about yourself there for a minute, Jeff.
I am he. Jeffrey Tucker at jeffreytucker.me, Liberty.me, CLO, digital development, fee.org, writer of summaries and introductions, laissez-faire books, and I don't know what else. You know, just doing the thing. These days, you know, causing a lot of trouble by apparently opposing Trump against, you know, the mainline bourgeoisie of the GOP, which is in a nationalistic, fascistic frenzy that's out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And I'm the editor of antiwar.com, and I do a radio show where I interview journalists about the wars. That's basically
you're so clear. I mean, who's more believable, you or me? I mean, you clearly have a more compelling, you know, sort of reductionist biographical Scott. So.
Yeah. Okay. That's the way that's fine.
I have a profound question, and it occurred to me today as I was driving along the road for no particular reason. The U.S. is losing its status as the world economic superpower. You know, the rise of China, India, the Far East, global prosperity spreading all over the world. For the first time in 100 years, the U.S. is now being challenged fundamentally. We've got U.S. incomes on the decline now, 20, 30, 40 years. I don't know, of stagnant U.S. incomes. A lot of resentment. But basically, you've got so that deep cultural presumption that's been alive for 100 years that we're number one, and that we get to dictate the terms, that nobody can beat us. It's us versus the world. We're masters of the universe. This can't last that much longer, if it's even alive now. So I'm just wondering, in light of that, how much do you think that this what strikes me as like a very obvious reality is playing into the politics of the moment? The sort of the sense of weirdo panic that you're getting at the core of American political life today, with the support for Sanders, for Trump, the sort of screaming desire to reconstitute the American greatness in some way. I mean, do you think these things are to some extent related?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely the core of it. You nailed it. It's economic insecurity. Now, I'm not so sure about the relative economic power of America versus the European Union, China, India, the BRICS, and whatever, because of course they've got plenty and plenty of government, lots and lots of government in those societies too, and major distortions in their economies as well. And so, I don't know. We have huge distortions here, but we're working off a very sound base of an economy here. There are a lot of factories, a lot of educated people, a lot of pretty good highways here. You know what I mean, for distribution. So.
Yeah, but I mean,
I don't think it's a matter of, oh no, China's rising, because who cares about that? What they make a great scapegoat. What matters is that people don't feel like they can take care of themselves. I read William Greider wrote the Washington Post version of the case against the Fed, I guess, The Secrets of the Temple, back in the 1980s, about the Volcker term. And he's writing pro-inflation and against Volcker for raising interest rates is basically his message. But anyway, the point is, he talks about how they keep the statistics of bankruptcies, and for that matter, of broken marriages and suicides and foster care, and all the rates of the damage done by their economic policies. And they know that it's their responsibility, and they look at that. And I mean, me, I'm the same as you, constantly online reading the news, and especially in 2008 and end of 2008 through 2009 and 10, it's just constant in the AP news wires. Man kills family, then self, just over and over and over and over again. Because these guys, they thought they were doing everything right. They worked hard this whole time, and then it turned out you know, their family can't rely on them after all. They get completely depressed. They blame themselves 100%, have no idea about the forces arrayed against them in the world, you know? And so, you know, they kill their kids and their wife and then blow their own head off over and over and over. I mean, really, there's like an epidemic of this kind of thing. And it's all because, you know, basically they're getting screwed by the central bank and the effects of those policies. I mean, and that's just one part of it, of course. There's the cost of the empire and the cost of the rest of the national government and whatever. But what's happened basically is there are massive unseen forces screwing these people. And so they're upset, they're insecure, whatever good job they had is gone. And then so, of course, you know, it's so much easier to blame trade with China or, you know, Mexican immigration or something like that than to actually go and read Rothbard and understand why there's a fake prosperity followed by a very real boom, how this happens, why it happens, why it's good for the state and its cronies, but bad for everybody else. And you know, I don't know.
But you know, did you ever read that book? I'm sorry, you have to Google it. But the title of the book is "War is the Force That Gives." War is the
Hedges. War is the force that gives us meaning.
Right. Did you read that book?
Yeah, it's a great one. It really is. And I am no fan of Chris Hedges, but that book is.
Yeah, I think I read that book. It's really awesome. But you know, you can, but in a sense, it's too narrowly drawn in a sense, because I mean, what I'm sensing right now is all these calls for, you know, bringing back American greatness and that sort of stuff. It's like, given that people are feeling so crappy about their own lives, and which I'm not even sure if that's based on illusion or not. I mean, you know, we have better technology than we've ever had. I mean, in some sense, the standard of living is higher than it's ever been. The problem is our discretionary income is on the decline, and the family structures are collapsing because of the requirement of two incomes. I mean, so it's a complicated picture, but you know, you wonder if maybe people are sort of like you know, asking the state to give us meaning. You know, like, I can't find meaning in my own life. You know, is there anything that the state or the nation, you know, as a kind of an organic, breathing, living, meaningful thing in the world, can give me personally some sense of belongingness that I don't currently feel under the current economic situation. I mean, that's what I sense from the Trump situation, and to some extent from the Sanders situation too. I mean,
yeah, well, of course, that's the whole Straussian thing, right? National greatness. We need a big project, and the Hoover Dam, or, you know, a new highway system or something like that. It's just not enough. We need war. We need something. I mean, for people to rally around, tell them whatever lie we need to get them to join up to fight the bad guys.
War is the second step. That's one thing, but it's just also sort of like building the state. I mean, you look at something like Russia under Stalin, right? So Stalin realized that communism was a disaster. Everything was sort of falling apart. You know, it was the whole project of the Bolshevik Revolution and Marxist-Leninism was ridiculous. So he reconstituted the whole ideology as a kind of instead of an international socialism, suddenly it was all about the Great Mother Russia. He wed patriotism and nativism to Marxist-Leninist ideology and sort of rescued it from itself by distracting people, saying, yeah, you know, your lives, you might feel crappy about your standard of living, but look, you're part of some grander project. You know,
that's a perfect analogy, right? We don't, never mind freedom. We already gave up on that. So we'll just, you know, give us something, you know, give us a shovel and a hole to dig, and we'll go do that and be part of something great. Like Rachel Maddow's commercials on MSNBC, you know.
Oh God, those are horrible.
Look at the Hoover Dam. We can build more big dams, everyone. Come on.
Yeah, and the New Deal was the same thing. I mean, look at the way it progressed. I mean, so things are hip during the 20s, everything's great, then everything falls apart, people lose faith in the economy, and then this jerk comes along with his proto-fascist, you know, sort of policies, FDR, and then it's like rally around the great policies. It doesn't matter if they don't work, they don't make sense, they're ridiculously expensive because they're spending money we don't have, and so on. It was like, you know, let's do something together, you know, as a nation, and that lasted for, you know, 6 or 7 years, and then it was like, well, geez, people are kind of getting annoyed at this too. Hey, here's a great idea. Let's have a gigantic global war where we draft everybody, we slaughter them, they're no longer on the unemployment rolls, and we reward ourselves for making the world, free of tyranny or whatever the hell it is. It's like these things sort of move from one iteration to the next, and it's a little scary actually when you think about it. Like, are we entering into a repeat of the same history?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the whole thing. That's why we're doing this show right now, is to try to explain that actually this kind of thing's happened before. And not just Mises, but all kinds of, people who understand capitalism have said before, no, freedom didn't cause the problem. And no, socialism and or fascism, left or right, however you choose it, is not the answer. It's freedom is what works. And it's abandoning freedom is what got us into this mess. And so deregulate completely, decentralize completely, start repealing laws, and don't stop ever. That's the solution, not great leadership, for God's sake. And, I don't know, man. I think a lot of Americans, I think of people I know, they're smarter than to believe in some great man coming promising them a bunch of crap. So I don't know who these people are who love it so much. I know Bernie Sanders. I can see people loving having an alternative to Hillary, or love having an alternative to Jeb. Give me somebody other than these people that, the establishment wants to foist on us. I certainly sympathize with that. But it's the same stupid reason why people become left and rightists in the first place, is to be at least not that other side that they're more against. And so,
Well, it's a big pain in the neck to me. It's like,
yeah.
I got to tell you, I've been very sort of bitter about this because, as I look at the trajectory we're moving on, so many, in so many ways, the structures of the old style government are being challenged as never before through P2P technology, whether it's Bitcoin or 3D printing or global online sharing and the app economy. And you see the practical effects on these micro monopolies like the taxi cabs in New York, or the way Airbnb is dismantling the zoning laws, and you see people through their consuming habits together with the entrepreneurs are kind of like gradually breaking down these old structures. You can see it, you can feel it, and if we have enough time, I think we can actually get where we want to go. I think it's actually possible. And then in the midst of all of this, Scott, in the midst of all this, we have to have an election. Like why are we doing this? And what are we going to get out of this? We're going to get another person with a mandate and a vision and some big desire to be part of the history book, by doing some great thing, which is going to be impossibly statist and horrible. And there's no chance whatsoever that whoever is elected is going to do anything good. I don't believe. Why? Like every speech, Trump says, "Why don't we hold the election today so I can become president now? Why don't we just do that?" And everybody goes, "Yeah." Well, my proposal is exactly the opposite. Let's just cancel this damn thing. Let's just not hold it at all, and just kind of keep making the what seems to me the very gradual, bit by bit progress that we're making. Has it always been this way? Has politics always been this horrible? Like a guarantee? It's going to give us something worse than what we have or what we would otherwise have. And has that always been true? I'm not entirely sure. But it certainly seems true to me this time. Like, no good can come of this. Nothing.
Yeah, no, I can't really disagree. It does just keep getting worse and worse. And of course, they just trade off. You have apparently, I don't know, roughly 150 million people lean a little bit left and lean a little bit right. And so they just trade off being angry or not. It's funny because the famous Carol Quigley quote from Tragedy and Hope, where he says, all we do, we have an election every 8 or even 4 years if necessary, so that the people can throw the rascals out without ever leading to a real substantial shift in policy. And we all know what the policy should be, and that is maintain the Atlantic Alliance and keep printing money, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Like that's his shtick. And what's funny is it's in reaction to the rise of the new right that almost got Barry Goldwater elected and a nuclear war started, right? And so Quigley is saying, holy crap, the actual outlier won the primary and the nomination. That never happens. It's always the Rockefeller guy on the left and the Rockefeller guy on the right that are the nominees, the centrists, the liberal Republican versus the conservative Democrat, right? Jeb versus Hillary. But so, oh no, in 64, this was the crazy aberration where Goldwater actually got the nomination. And how dangerous and scary was that, where the establishment people here, and Quigley wouldn't agree, but the establishment guys here are the worst. Right there, the absolute worst people you can imagine. But the alternatives to them are even worser. I mean, look at who we're talking about here. Bernie Sanders, who would have us all completely bankrupt and out on our ass.
Yeah, we'd be like having to become cannibals of our own children. I mean, there'd be mass famine if this guy gets in charge,
Yeah. And versus Donald Trump, who's just, you know what, I'll create my own private army. I don't care about you. And just raise up the brown shirts to go and challenge the old national security state. I'll make my own. I got $1 billion. I got $1 trillion. Try and stop me.
Yeah, I mean, it's the absence of principle, in American public life today is shocking, and the absence of the word human liberty. It's very frustrating. Now you watch these Republican debates and nobody actually talks about like human liberty. I mean,
no one talks about freedom at all. They don't even pretend. They totally forgot to even pretend that they care about freedom. This is the exact same thing in the 90s. I remember all the right wingers pretended they hated government. Oh, we hate government. Those jackbooted thugs. Boo hoo hoo. We hate them so much. And then by the time of Lewinsky in 98, and by the time of Republican regime change, you know what? That Bill Clinton, he's a disgrace to the great office of the great presidency of the great government of the United States of America. Now Bush and Cheney and the real adults are going to come in and be great leaders. Let us all kneel and worship them. Like, yeah. And then these guys come back and call themselves the Tea Party. We're for fiscal responsibility. Yeah, sure you are. You're for world revolution the day before yesterday. Now you're for fiscal responsibility. Please, just give them their next McCain. Give them their next, and Trump.
Well, yeah, I'll never trust these Tea Party. I guess I was brief. Was I? I mean, I feel like maybe I was briefly tempted to think that this Tea Party movement could amount to something. I'm not entirely sure about that, but maybe I wasn't as alarmed by them as I should have been. But now you see what's happened, right? I mean, this whole kind of revolt, that we saw, over the last 10 years is all just completely funneled into, like fanatical Trump worship. I mean, it's just an awesome thing. You're blindly following this would-be dictator around, where, he's proclaiming, let's deport everybody. Let's execute Edward Snowden. Let's wage war on trade war on the world.
Let's reinvade Iraq and occupy all their oil fields and starve the people there out until they don't exist anymore.
Or let's my favorite. I've mentioned this to you before, Scott, but I just can't forget it. Let's make nuclear weapons mean something again. It's like what the
hell? Fission or fusion or both or what?
Yeah. So, and people are like, and let's have single payer healthcare. Let's have single payer. Jonah Goldberg.
Dude, you know what? Hey! I thought of you yesterday. I read a thing. Oh, you know what? It was Jonah Goldberg though, so it might not be true at all.
I was going to mention about Jonah Goldberg.
He says in there that when Trump voters are told that he endorses single payer healthcare, their support for single payer healthcare goes up from 25% to 44%. That's conservatism in America for you right there. Right there. Although then again, that was written by Jonah Goldberg, so it might be an outright lie. I mean, I think people should really double check that statistic before taking my word for it. Because Jonah Goldberg is the lowest scum on the planet Earth, so there's that. He's worse than Donald Trump, you got to admit.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he always struck me as slightly more libertarian than some of the other people there, but I just don't know. I don't read him enough. But
you should read Baghdad Delenda Est, Part 1 and 2 by him. And
would he come out later against the? I mean, I know these guys are inconsistent, but.
No, I don't think so.
Against the war,
I might be wrong, but I
don't know. But anyway, on the healthcare thing, he says, "Guys, don't you know? I mean, for 10 years, this has been the thing that's united us as conservatives. is opposition to single-payer healthcare. You know, how can you be doing this? Well, so the problem, here's the problem. You can't really unite people based on some bogus little policy issue like that, some wonky thing. Look, I'm against single-party healthcare, but that's not a principled stand. That's not a philosophy. That's not a rooted, you know, perspective on seeing the world just to be against some left-wing wonky thing. I mean, yeah, of course people are going to throw that away when they get enticed by some, you know, would-be dictator billionaire. And yeah, so they just throw it all away because why? Because there's been no schooling or knowledge or understanding of the idea of human liberty, which I gather is too abstract an idea for the bourgeoisie or for the journalists of National Review to even comprehend nowadays.
Yep. Hey man, tell me about Joseph Schumpeter. I know I'm saying that wrong, but I'm from Texas. What do I know?
Yeah.
You're telling me about, you read this great book that he wrote about imperialism.
Look, it was written a century ago, and it was called Sociology of Imperialisms. And he marches through all these different kinds of empires, from Rome to the Arab Empire to the British Empire, Spain. You know, I guess I wrote about this 2 weeks ago, and he distinguishes.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, somewhere. But he distinguishes. They all have sort of different characteristics. Some of them are more cruel, and some of them are more smart. Like the cruel ones just go in and kill everybody, rape all the women, pillage all the property. The intelligent ones go in and just insist on sort of loyalty at the top, but otherwise sort of re-employ all the people who are sort of the professional bureaucrats and preserve all the value of the property and that sort of thing. So imperialisms take many different forms. Some of them very stupid, some of them cruel, some murderous, some of them somewhat humanitarian at some level, just kind of a nice colonialism or something like that. And as I was reading, this was 1912, so this is before we really saw the fullness of the American empire. And I kept trying to understand. Oh, the other thing is that he says the motivations for each empire is different. Some of them are designed, are constructed out of a sort of a messianic desire to conquer the world. Others are designed to retain domestic political control and whip up the public against some weird foreign enemy. Mm-hmm. So each one of them has some of them are just purely resource based. Let's go out and pillage other people's stuff. So every empire has a different sort of rationale and a different method for going about its business. And this was, as I say, it was written in 1912, and I found the book so incredibly insightful. I mean, just from a historical point of view. And God, I don't know why don't we have scholars like this anymore? I don't really know. I mean, it was so erudite and so knowledgeable. But as I was reading, kept trying to understand what is the nature and character of the American empire. And it seems like it sort of combines the worst traits of all empires in all of human history. In a way, it's like the worst motivations, the worst tactics, and also, combined with a healthy dose of rampant stupidity. It was just sort of overwhelmed me. Like I would love for him to be around now to update this book on a final chapter on the nature of the U.S. empire.
Yeah. Well, in fact, back to that same passage of Carroll Quigley again. That's what he's complaining about, is the rise of the new right, the military-industrial complex after World War II. That after a war effort that big, there's no dismantling the thing. They got a hold of Harry Truman real quick, and they said, we're going to find something to do.
It was fairly quick, but there was kind of a substantial demilitarization that happened after World War II, and a decontrol, substantial. Of course, it didn't go back to where it was before World War II. But yeah, then the Cold War came along and changed everything. The more I think about it, the Cold War was the thing that really ruined life on Earth in a way. It corrupted the right. It made it impossible for the U.S. to go back to a sort of a normalcy. And I grew up in the Cold War, so my whole impression was that we only had a military empire to get rid of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union went away. We still have the empire, and I gather, I mean, you keep up with this better than I do. Weren't you telling me that the U.S. is currently engaged in a bunch of wars around the world, and you wanted to kind of march through them a little bit?
Yeah, that's part of the plan for the show later on. Whenever we're done talking about this stuff, is to get through, a picture of America's intervention as it stands right now.
Yeah, I'd like to know about it just because I mean, there's still the typical member of the bourgeoisie in this country is pretty much unaware. It was actually my old friend Joe Stromberg who used to point this out to me.
Mm.
Most Americans have no clue that the U.S. is really doing anything to anybody anywhere in the world. I mean, they think America is really just backyard barbecues and baseball and pop music. That's what their conception of America is. Around the world, though, it's something completely different. And that's why after 9/11, Americans got the entirely wrong message from this. They didn't think, oh my God, this is the consequences of empire. They thought, huh, here's some crazy ragheads that hate us for no particular reason, just because they had no idea what the U.S. is even doing abroad.
Yep. And what's sad about that is that's kind of what's beautiful about living all the way over here in North America and having as a creed that we believe in individual liberty and never mind everything else, kind of a thing. That the old world, they're always going to be fighting over those borders and how well they match up with different ethnicities and these kinds of things. And we should be, we mostly are free of that kind of thing over here. We mostly are free to mind our own business. I'm from Texas. I've known plenty of people who never left their home county.
That's right.
Their whole life long. And why leave? Everything that is there, their family, all their work, all their church and their everything is right there. And that's why their great grandparents fled whatever hellhole to come here in the first place, so they could mind their own business. But they're doing such a good job minding their own business that they have no idea that their government is not minding its own business.
No, they have no clue.
So they, as you say, they have no idea. So busy living their life, they just kind of assume that that's the way America operates.
It's a beautiful thing. Where I just was? I was just in Wyoming, and I don't know how much you know about Wyoming, but there's nobody there.
Oh, it's beautiful, man.
I mean,
this is
completely empty. Apparently, it's owned 97% by the federal government. Every bit of property that you try to develop, is sort of leased from the feds, which is just an outrage in a way. But it's so funny to be there because there's a number of things that strike you. One is you can't believe this place is actually. In a way, I was actually impressed. I was standing on top of a mountaintop looking out after what looked like 300 miles of gorgeous mountains and everything else. And I thought, this is a very successful empire from D.C. that it ever could have gained control in any sense of this place. So far away, so sparsely populated. I mean, it's in a sense, the U.S. is one of the most successful empires in the history of the world, that it could have gained control of such vast amounts of territory. And yet every little coffee shop downstairs was obeying every tiny regulation, that it comes out of the Federal Register. It's an awesome thing that something like that exists. So I couldn't believe that the U.S., Washington, D.C. purports to manage this place at all. That's kind of awesome. But meanwhile, I'm there in the midst of this immigration hysteria. Oh my God, people are pouring into this country. Well, I mean, most of this country is completely empty, and unpopulated, actually. I mean, I don't know how much people understand this, but you only have to go to a place like Wyoming to suddenly realize this. I mean, it's
just go up in an airplane and look out the window.
There's nothing here. I mean, every once in a while I see a town. But it's
the frontier's closed, but we're not done filling in the spaces. That's all.
You can fit the whole world's population in a place like Wyoming, and nobody would ever have to. You'd still be able to live a mile apart from each other or something. I don't know.
Well, of course, the empire's so big now that's why they had to coin the phrase "homeland." Well, first of all, is to break you of whatever associations you made with USA. The country where you thought you were from, where you were free. But secondly, Washington, D.C., they're really busy and they got to separate these things so they can keep track of them. And there's the world empire where they, deem to control all of the entire world, including, as Carl Gershman wrote in the Washington Post, Vladimir Putin, if he doesn't like it, he might find himself regime change too. Is their attitude. Oh, and then of course, we still got to rule everybody, between Bangor, Maine and San Diego, California too. And so that's, their separate priority, mostly to suck off of us so that they can pay for the foreign empire.
It strikes me as just so implausible and completely unsustainable, especially in modern times. I mean, the whole American empire just seems so like absurdly 19th century. And by empire I mean not international, but so-called domestic. Although you shouldn't call it domestic. I mean, the United States should be several hundred countries at least. It seems to me.
We could start with 50. And then, I'm all for further secession than that. We could break Texas into 5 overnight. That'd be all right.
Yeah. By the way, just in passing, Scott, I want you to know that I fell off a horse.
Are you all right?
Yeah.
All right.
I rode a horse. I mean, I galloped on a horse.
Great.
Galloped on and I didn't center my gravity right. You're supposed to like ride forward. I was sort of sitting up. Fell off on the ground.
Oh man! Well, I'm glad you're okay.
Well, yeah, I'm not. But
I thought you said you were okay.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm alive or whatever. I sprained my wrist. Yeah, it's still hurting, but bruises all over me. But it was funny in Wyoming. You stand up from a situation like that. You're surrounded by cowboys, and you try to get some sympathy. They're like, "What are you doing? Get back on your horse, buddy. Just shape up." It's pretty funny.
I want to go horseback ride. I haven't ridden a horse in 20 years or 25.
Why do we like horses?
I was a little kid.
What is it so appealing about getting on a horse and using it?
They're like big, nice dogs, and you can ride on them.
The horse was
fast if you get a fast one.
Oh, this one was. I think I was going 40 miles an hour when I flew off this thing and hit the ground. I mean, it was. I know the whole thing seems implausible to you, but yeah, it was quite the awesome experience. The cowboys of Wyoming, they're just the salt of the earth. They tell me the best stories about environmentalism. They laugh about the left-wing environmentalists trying to protect this and protect that. These people really understand and know the land. They respect and love nature, but they also understand that there's enemies out there. Grizzly bears, wolves. And one cowboy saying, I don't know what it is with all the liberals in this country. By liberals, you know who he means. He says they seem to be they're only interested in the predators. They only want to protect the worst animals against the best. And they're always pushing crazy schemes to stop development and stop us from doing what we have to do to survive around here. It was a really fascinating sort of opportunity to sort of touch real people and real frontiers. I mean, real frontiers people, and they still exist in this country. It's just awesome. Just freedom loving, salt of the earth, cowboys and cowgirls.
All right. Well, if I ever take a vacation, I'm going back to Wyoming because it is really nice.
Now, have you been? So you have been?
Oh yeah, I've been there when I was a kid. Yellowstone and all that kind of thing.
Well, it was kind of yeah. I mean, the reason I was there was that this is a traditional place now for the Federal Reserve to hold its annual conference of central bankers from around the world. They all go to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and live it up. This has been going on for 40 years, 35, 40 years, something like that. And this year, for the first time, they had opposition conferences, one from the left, where these people just think that the goal of monetary policy is to print as much as possible and make the world instantly rich through some sort of magical means, or whatever it is these people think. And when I got to the airport, they were there. The Federal Reserve was there, and they were there. And my group was the sound money gold standard opposition. And I didn't speak about the gold standard since I don't have that much interest in that subject anymore, even though it has been a lifetime passion. But ever since cryptocurrency was invented, that's been my passion. So I was on a panel with the great, well, I say that because you may not or may not agree, but at least on technology, is great George Gilder. So I'm sitting on a panel with George Gilder to speak about cryptocurrency, and it was wonderful. But so now the Fed is being challenged from I guess you could say the left and the right. I mean, I don't like to think of myself right, but I mean, that's the way the world treats it. And it was fabulous. So we had 3 simultaneous conferences and 3 separate visions of what money is. And I think it's great. I mean, and the New York Times wrote a big article about it, so I was pleased to be there. I mean, that's the way you make a difference, I think.
Yeah, I saw a thing. A guy sent me a link to Peter Schiff talking about a Black Lives Matter group that was out there protesting, I guess the group from the left that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then so I went and Googled that, and I found where there was a Huffington Post article about how it was some liberal college professors, economics professors, who said, you know, we need to organize a group of people to demand lower and lower interest rates and easier monetary policy, because otherwise you're being mean to the poor.
That's it.
So that was where they came from.
I loved hanging out with Peter. He and I had dinner a couple of nights, and he's just endlessly fun and endlessly interesting, and a grave Bitcoin skeptic, by the way. You know, he doesn't believe any of the stuff, so he treats me like I'm a deluded digital fanatic or something, which maybe I am, but I enjoyed seeing him and just enjoyed being in the presence of what struck me anyway as a great intellectual firmament.
Yeah. All right. Well, so you want to talk about the wars or what?
Let's do it. You want to talk about all these ghastly wars that the Federal Reserve is funding right now?
Yeah, let's do it. So, well, first of all, Tom in the chat room has a great opportunity that if America had just been played the bigger man and done, like Ron Paul said or Harry Brown said at the time, do an extremely limited operation just to hunt down bin Laden, Zawahiri, and their, maybe a couple of dozen closest friends, put them on trial, shut the whole thing down, and then go ahead and end the empire anyway. What are we doing bases in Saudi Arabia anyway? What are we doing intervening in Israel, Palestine anyway? And we could have done a lot, had the whole world on our side, and completely blew it. And
that's right.
And that's kind of the theme for my whole little rant here is how America, and I'm tongue in cheek here, obviously, but there are so many people who think Al Qaeda just works for the CIA and that kind of deal. But I think you could spin it just as easy the other way around, where, really Bush and Cheney, and for that matter, Obama and Biden and Hillary and them all really work for Al Qaeda and have all along, because they've done nothing but accomplish bin Laden's goals this entire time. And so what it was that bin Laden was trying to do, as was well explained before 9/11 ever happened, and of course they attacked us in the First World Trade Center in 1993, and the Khobar Towers attack in Saudi Arabia, the African embassies and the coal, and then September 11th. And they're trying to draw us in. And James Bamford puts it, they saw bin Laden in the role of Ho Chi Minh, and they're trying to drag us into another Vietnam, just like had been America's policy to drag Russia into their own Vietnam in Afghanistan in the 1980s. They wanted to replicate that against the United States of America. And so that's why the terrorist attack it's a provocation to try to get you to overreact. The goal being to get America again to get bogged down, bankrupt itself, and then withdraw in humiliating defeat like the Soviet Union did, and then leave them alone. Get out of the region entirely, because they figured none of their local revolutions could ever succeed or take hold as long as America is backing their local dictatorships. So the goal was to get us to intervene over there, bog us down, bankrupt our treasury, radicalize the region, and turn them against their American loyal sock puppet dictators, and then eventually declare their caliphate, which at the time, even at the time of bin Laden's death in the spring of 2001, was still just his attic where he was hiding from his wife, even up in, Nowheresville in Pakistan. There was no caliphate. There was nothing. But anyway, I'm skipping ahead there. It's only, very recently that it's gone that far. But what America's done really is accomplish all of their goals, although Bush, really because he was forced to, really short-circuited their plan by leaving Iraq early, by signing a deal to leave Iraq in great numbers early. They wanted us to stay for years and years and lose thousands and thousands more guys and trillions more dollars before we left. But anyway, they did completely radicalize the region. If you look at the Arab Spring, well, first of all, the Iraq War, America, by invading and then staying and taking a side in building a so-called democracy there, majority rules, that means siding with the Shia Arabs and the Kurds against the Sunni Arabs and kicking them all out of Baghdad and straight in the arms of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which helped them fight which never existed before the invasion in Iraqi Sunnistan, but rose up after the invasion, and of course grew into the Islamic State that we're dealing with today. But then that's what really set off the sectarian Sunni Shia civil war that had not been going on, but now is raging across the region. And if you look at the Arab Spring in 2011 with the revolution in Tunisia and Egypt, and then in what began in Libya, in Yemen, in Bahrain, and Syria, this was all because of the destabilization of the region by America's invasion of Iraq, all the refugees, the debasing of our currency, which all their governments had to match in order to prevent, disruptions in the trade balances and so forth, but ended up leading to inflation that rode into the very poor. When you only live on $1 a day and now your dollar's worth 50 cents, that's the difference between make it or break it for your kids being alive, kind of thing. So those were the bread riots and the destabilization that led to the revolutions in Tunisia and Egypt. Then America and Saudi and their henchmen hijacked the Arab Spring in Libya and in Syria and in Yemen. They crushed it in Bahrain and got away with it there with Saudi force. They did a regime change. Well, they supported a military coup in Egypt, which canceled the democratic revolution there. They got rid of one sock puppet and installed another in Yemen. But worst of all, what Obama did in reaction to the Arab Spring was in working with Saudi, Turkey, Israel, and Qatar to support the revolution against Assad in Syria. And now the majority, 70-something% of Syrians are Sunni Arabs. However, most of them actually support the government. Not that they support Assad, the dictator, because I don't think anybody really likes him, but they support the army and they support the state for the same reason that Americans supported George W. Bush. He's fighting Al-Qaeda for us. And so that was basically the deal, is America and Saudi backing the jihadists, the bad guys from Iraq War II, have become the moderate rebels in the war in Syria. And they're working to overthrow Assad there, which is what's leading to this massive refugee crisis right now. And so here you have America fought and is still fighting for Iran and their interests in Shiistan in southeastern Iraq. They're still backing the Kurds in northern Iraq. They're fighting both against the Islamic State in western Iraq and in eastern Syria, where America is backing not the Islamic State, but is backing the guys who are exactly like them in al-Nusra and Ahrar al-Sham, the other jihadist groups. There are no moderates. Those are just a myth. They're all a bunch of head-chopping bin Ladenite suicide bomber crazies, including the so-called Free Syrian Army. And America is actually on the side of the bin Ladenites, along with our allies, against Iran's ally, Assad, in Syria. And only because that's what our allies want, as basically a sop to them. And then on top of that, where America has had a drone war going on in Yemen for, really since Obama came into power in 2009. Bush had done a couple, but Obama's been steadily bombing them since 2009. Right now, we're actually backing the Saudis' war for Al-Qaeda. At the same time, we're still drone bombing them. As recently as last week, we're fighting with the Saudis for Al-Qaeda against their enemies, the so-called Iranian-backed Shiite Houthi movement, which has taken over Sana'a in response to, in basically as reaction to America overthrowing their last puppet and installing the next one. And they drove him out of power. Iran actually, and even Obama himself admitted, Iran warned the Houthis not to take the capital city because it would be biting off more than they could chew and cause bad reaction from the Saudis. They did it anyway. But anyway, as long as they're blaming it on Iran, you literally have America fighting for and against Al-Qaeda in Yemen at the same damn time. I mean, fighting for Iran in Iraq and for Al-Qaeda against Iran in Syria, that's one thing. But fighting for and against both sides in Yemen at the same damn time? And meanwhile, we still got 10,000 guys in Afghanistan, and we still got a drone war going on in Pakistan, where they're just, killing people in recent weeks. Anyone can check news.antiwar.com. Jason Ditz keeps us all up to date on all the latest of the drone wars. And then, of course, the Libya war spread down into Mali, and the jihadists from Libya met the jihadists from Nigeria in Mali and traded, radical ideology and weapons and training, and made Boko Haram in Nigeria even worse than they ever were, and now a declared adjunct of the Islamic State, which is the same thing you have in Libya. And you still have the drone war in Somalia, which is what took an Islamic courts movement that was led by a bunch of old men, a bunch of moderate old men that America could have dealt with. And we sponsored Ethiopia and other countries to invade and occupy the place, overthrow that government, and in response has risen up the Al-Shabaab movement, which is just basically Al-Qaeda in Somalia, which just attacked and killed a bunch of people in the capital city, I think 2 days ago. So there's your news hostility scoreboard. America's still at war, still killing people on all sides of all battles in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Libya, Mali, Nigeria, Syria, and Iraq. Oh, and also in February 2014, they supported a coup d'etat by a bunch of Nazis in Ukraine, who then they went to war against the people in the East who refused to accept the coup government. And Obama sent the military there, and they are now, our Rangers are over there training the Azov Battalion and the right sector, Hitler-loving, Jew-hating Nazis with literal swastikas and SS lightning bolts and 88 and 14s. You know, Trump voters, only the very right edge of the Ukrainian Trump voters, for real, over there. And we're and working on a war, literally working on getting us into a war with Russia over a country that is as important to them as any province in Russia. You know, maybe they didn't want to fight a nuclear war over Germany. They were all the way extended that far west from their own border at that point anyway. The line was drawn halfway across Germany, but they will fight for Ukraine. And America is trying to make a fight out of that. And it's the very same neocons, the very same couple of dozen relatives of Gertrude Himmelfarb and Irving Kristol and Norman Podhoretz and their sons and their cousins who have done this, all of them, on each and every one of these goddamn wars, including the Afghan surge, which was Fred Kagan.
Well, this is why we pay you the big bucks, Scott. That was an awesome roundup. Awesome. But the thing that struck me and actually sort of blows my mind is your trajectory you drew between U.S. intervention in Iraq, initially 25 years ago, I guess, and the current refugee crisis in Europe. I wonder if you could explain that a little bit more, because I don't know how much people are aware of the news about this refugee crisis. Can you explain to me what's going on and its meaning and implications for Europe?
Yeah, well, if you want to go back to 91, very quickly, Bush, basically his Secretary of State baited, I don't know deliberately, Jeff, the way it played out, I don't think so. It was stumbling a bit, but they basically told Saddam, go ahead and invade Kuwait. We don't care. Just take the northern oil fields and don't take the whole country. But he took the whole country. And then Margaret Thatcher said, oh, no, we can't have that. Don't get wobbly. And so they had Operation Desert Storm. And once they started the buildup, they wouldn't take peace for an answer. Saddam tried to negotiate. They wouldn't do it. And America occupied the Saudi desert in order to launch the war against Iraq. And then when the war was over, they stayed because they had encouraged the Shia to rise up and overthrow Saddam. And then they left him high and dry as Saddam slaughtered him with his attack helicopters that they let him keep. And so then they said, well, now we have to have a no-fly zone over Iraq. So we have to stay in Saudi Arabia and keep the sanctions on. We'll never lift the sanctions and we'll never lift the no-fly zones over Iraq, became the policy. And that was what brought on the Al-Qaeda war against the United States. That and, of course, support for Israel and their perpetual wars against the people of Lebanon and Palestine. And so those were the policies that led up to the 9/11 attack, which then, as you say, we're supposed to just think, what? Well, we didn't do a thing in the 1990s except sit around and watch Seinfeld and watch The Simpsons, and that was all that happened or whatever. But in fact, it wasn't. And but so they pretended history began yesterday. They attacked us for no good reason. So now we have to go defend ourselves. So, and then that became cover for invading Iraq, even though Saddam Hussein was enemies with Osama bin Laden. They had no ties whatsoever. They just said, hey, are you upset and you still want to kill some people? Well, come on. And they kind of said, well, we have to do Iraq because of September 11th. Because that day we learned that from now on, we have to start all the wars instead of waiting around for someone to attack us. But what you thought that they were saying was because Saddam did 9/11. Isn't that what it sounded like he said? And so that's how they basically, BS the American people into there. And it was because, again, these neoconservatives who are Likudniks first, meaning the right-wing nationalist party in Israel of Ariel Sharon and Benjamin Netanyahu, and they wanted to smash the Middle East into smaller and smaller tribal and warring states. As David Wimser wrote in Coping with Crumbling States about Syria, we want to expedite the chaotic collapse, and the sooner the better to make it, to turn things our way. And so that's exactly what they got. They fought 8-year war in Iraq, really 5 of it a full-scale civil war for the Shia against the Sunnis, and dividing that country permanently into thirds the way they did. And they created 4.5 million refugees, internal and external, during that war. About half of them went to Jordan and Syria. Probably of those, probably much more than half went to Syria and some to Jordan. And then once the war in Syria broke out, they had no place else to go except, I guess, some of them went back to Iraq, others went to Turkey, and then many more have joined them in Turkey. America's been waging war again with our allies for 4 years straight, supporting the Sunni insurgency, the bin Ladenites, in this war in Syria. And now they're worried. Patrick Coburn is reporting that they're threatening the last major highway lifeline between the capital city and whichever other Aleppo or another couple of major cities there. And so people are running scared. The dead toddler on the beach that is all in the media right now. They're trying to say, well, so we have to attack Syria. Enough is enough. We have to attack Assad in Damascus. But that baby boy was a Kurd who fled the town of Kobani, which America did take the Kurd side. But who were they fleeing? They were fleeing from the Islamic State. Yes. And America helped the Kurds hold on to that town. But now what? Now America's made a deal with the Turks, and the Turks don't want an independent Kurdistan there in northern Syria. Right. That threatens their territorial integrity with their internal Kurdish problem that they have to deal with. And so they said, okay, America, we'll let you use our Incirlik air base in order to attack Islamic State targets in Syria and Iraq if you will stab the Kurds in the back and abandon them to us. And then the Turks started bombing them. And so now we're just supposed to not look into it, right? This is no different than, the Iraqi soldiers who stole the incubators and left the Kuwaiti babies to die on the cold floor. It's no different than the Yazidis trapped on the mountain, or the weapons of mass destruction, or the impending slaughter in Benghazi, or on and on and on with all these fake casus belli. But all that matters is, look, a dead kid. Aren't you too upset to ask me about the details of how he got that way? Good, then let's bomb something. And what they want to bomb, again, and I know it makes me sound like I'm the one who's crazy when I tell you, Jeff, they want to bomb on behalf of the bin Ladenites against the guy in the 3-piece suit with the clean-shaven chin who is leading the coalition of Sunnis, Shia, Alawites, Druze, and Christians. That's the guy they want to overthrow in favor of the suicide bomber, head chopper, September 11th killers.
Awesome. And the refugee crisis going on in Europe, I suppose that there's enormous political pressure to accept everybody in, which obviously is a free migrationist I agree with. However, this, I suppose, is going to help the growing problem of the far right in Europe, which is basically a proto-neo-Nazi based movement of nativists and racialists that seems to be gaining all sorts of ground in France and Hungary, and probably in an underground sense in Germany and elsewhere, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure I think it varies from country to country whether these right-wing nationalists really are, go as far as, being actual Nazis or not, really bad, or just, what we would call Republicans. And I'm not exactly sure what's the difference, when Republicans are pretty bad to me. But yeah, I mean, this is certain to inflame them.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it just sort of, you get this blowback in every direction. It's blowback, and then more blowback against the blowback, and so on. And
well, it's interesting too that I think a lot of these refugees have been in Turkey for a long time, and it sort of looks like, and I don't know enough about this really, but it sort of looks like the Turks are kicking them all out and trying to tell them to all go to Europe. Yeah. And that may be Erdogan playing hardball with the US and the EU, and trying to get us to commit to going ahead and overthrowing Assad. Because, Obama's been willing to back the Mujahideen against him, but he's not been willing to do enough to make sure that Assad loses so far anyway. And the Turks, and the Saudis, and I don't know about the Israelis. I guess they're happy with the status quo so far. But, the Turks and the Saudis seem absolutely hell-bent on getting rid of Assad as soon as possible. And so this may be leveraged by him. You want some more of these refugees? I'll release another few 100,000. How do you like that kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, it's not something we have to deal with in the U.S. I mean, for the most part, I think our migration so-called crisis is entirely made up. I don't see any basis for it whatsoever. I mean, it's true we have a lot of illegal immigration, but that's what happens when you make it impossible for people to legally immigrate. They're going to become illegal. I mean, it's the same thing with the drug war and alcohol prohibition or anything else. I mean, you prohibit immigration, legal immigration, you're going to get an explosion of illegal immigration. It's just, it's the inevitable consequence of it. But I don't think
the entire region's at war right now. So what are civilians supposed to do except run?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a massive sectarian war. 10 years ago, I was saying things like, oh, man, the consequences of this invasion of Iraq are just going to be playing out like this for decades and decades and decades. And it's just like that. And it's not going away. I mean, the fact that, the Shiites have not ruled an Arab capital city for 1,000 years, and now they do. And not like I care, but I'm just saying, so that means that there are going to be Sunnis who are willing to throw suicide bombers at that capital city of Baghdad from now unto eternity. I mean, it took the American Army and Marine Corps years to give it to the Shia. So the Sunnis aren't going to be able to take it back without major help, major firepower. But they're going to keep suicide bombing it from now on. I mean, this fight is going to and the border between Kurdistan and the Islamic State, the border between Iraqi Shiistan and the Islamic State, you're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, where it's just going to be like World War I trench, or I don't know, trenches, but, inches and feet moving back and forth these lines for our lifetimes. This is going to just continue.
Yeah, and to go back again to the beginning of your story, I mean, let's not forget that all of this really does begin with George Bush 1, with Operation Desert Storm. And
although, you know what, Junior, I mean, and the thing is, look, I'm not for any of these nationalist dictatorships. Supporting dictatorships got us into this mess, but supporting revolutions against them is not necessarily the right thing to do either. We could just back off, and what Junior could have done after September 11th was said, all right, look here, Hussein, I'm mad, so capitulate to all my demands. And my demands are, if there's any bin Ladenites in your country, string them up. And Hussein would have said, all right, fine, shake on it. And then that's it. And, he was the massive cork in the bottle, keeping these guys. They were stranded. There were a few dozen of them stranded in no man's land in Afghanistan, on the Durand line between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And Bush brought them 2,000 miles west. And then Obama brought them all the way almost to the Mediterranean Sea now. So, sorry, I got off on that tangent again. They made Junior, as bad as what Bush Sr. did and Bill Clinton with his blockade and all of that, Junior could have, tried to heal it rather than just absolutely quadruple down. Make it worse than anyone could have ever predicted,
I mean, it's an awesome thing to consider that, what an opportunity we had at the end of the Cold War to just become a normal country. We declined, and here we are still, 2015, seeing the continuing rollout of these policies, which people don't look back historically. I mean, it would just be an awesome thing if at some pundit on television, you know, at a Republican debate or a Democratic debate or anything, would speak realistically about this in light of a lot of history and current realities, to speak honestly and truthfully about the role that empire has caused, and sort of rollout of unending political catastrophes. This is, you know, sort of brings us back to the beginning, really. I mean, you said an interesting thing that as bad as dictatorship is, sometimes these revolutionaries are even worse. I feel that that's, you know, at a much lower, slower burning level is kind of more or less what we face in the U.S. You know, with on the one hand the establishment, and then you have the opposition, quote unquote, to the establishment. You know,
I miss Ron. I'm sorry. I know I say that every show.
We couldn't get through the show without you saying that, so I was just waiting for that.
He's so great on all this stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's true enough. It's true enough. Well, I'm looking forward to visiting against next week. The cool thing about the show, Scott, is that history is moving so fast that forward, that or backwards, I don't know which way, but anyway, moving, that we always have wonderful things to talk about. So I thank you so much for your erudition and insight.
Yeah, and everybody, you should know that we're now here every other Tuesday.
Oh, is that our
regular time?
Every other? We're not doing it weekly. We're doing it every other week.
Well, we can do it weekly if you want.
Well, I don't even know what our schedule is. You know, I wake up in the morning.
We'll have to change the time if we're going to do it weekly, because right now we're alternating with Sheldon and Lucy.
Oh,
but,
okay. No, I mean, it's fine. I don't know. I mean, it's up to you. But I just wake up in the morning and check my Google Calendar and do what I'm told. So, you know, that's...
Yeah, there you go. All right. Well, we'll figure out what to tell your Google Calendar, what to tell you to do.
Good to talk to you, Scott.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.